Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar on how to reduce your risks of becoming a cyber victim. My name is Sarah Speltz, and I'm an Associate Director in the BU Alumni Relations Office. Today's webinar is sponsored by the Boston University Alumni Association and is offered as part of our alumni educational programming. Many of our educational programs are held on campus, but we offer educational webinars because we want to connect with our alumni around the globe. And we do have alumni joining us today from Pakistan and Saudi Arabia, as well as many places in the US, including California, New York, Nevada, Georgia, Maryland, Texas, Oklahoma, Tennessee, and of course, New England. Before I introduce today's speaker, some housekeeping notes. The webinar is being hosted on our Zoom online meeting platform. If you experience any trouble with the audio or visual portions of this presentation, please contact Zoom support. And you see the number on your screen there. I will also read it to you if you want to write it down. 1-888-799-9666. Today's presentation is being recorded and will soon be available for on-demand viewing on the Alumni Association website, which is bu.edu/alumni. Our speaker today is eager to answer your questions, and you are welcome to submit them anytime throughout the presentation using the Q&A box. So you just hover over the box or tap at the top or bottom of your screen and select Q&A. Now, it is my pleasure to introduce our speaker for the day. Presenting from Calgary in Canada is Chris Kaiser. He's a 2016 graduate of BU's Metropolitan College. He is a cyber criminologist and is the founder, president, and CEO of Cybercrime Analytics, a Calgary-based cybercrime consulting and research company. Chris has more than 25 years of experience in the computer field, 15 years in the financial services industry, and research and work in cybercrime investigation and cybersecurity. He's a sought-after consultant, researcher, and presenter, which means we're very lucky to have access to his expertise today. Chris, thanks again for being with us, and the floor is yours.
Thank you. I'll just get my slides up here. Here we go. We're ready to go. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. My thanks to Boston alumni for inviting me to speak today. The intention of today's presentation is to inform, educate, and raise your awareness of the many factors that facilitate cybercrime, how to recognize them, and best practices to mitigate these risks. This presentation is not designed to be highly technical. This is not because technology does not play an important role in the battle against cybercrime. Technology can be very effective in detecting, intercepting, and preventing cybercrime. It can prevent up to 95% of cyber attacks. One cybersecurity company alone who monitors email traffic for some of the world's largest corporations blocks nearly 150 million email threats per day. Other endpoint cyber protection companies eliminate up to 98% of malicious attacks. However, the real threat of becoming a cyber victim is a constant, the human element. How we conduct ourselves when using electronic devices and computer systems continues to be the single biggest factor that contributes to escalating rates of cybercrime. Regardless of how exacting technological solutions become, there is still one aspect of guardianship related to cyber attacks that technology has yet to address: human nature and human curiosity, in order to predict how we will react to an attempted cyber attack. While much of the information I will cover today may be new to some and obvious to others, it is important to remember that those who execute cyber attacks are depending on people's reluctance to recognize even the most basic aspects of these types of crimes and their mistaken belief that they are smarter than cyber criminals. We must never lose sight of the fact that those who elect to commit cyber crimes do so with no regard to the well-being of their targets, be they individuals or organizations, and that they work tirelessly every day to find new ways to bypass technological advances and to capitalize on human nature and human curiosity to assist them in gaining access to our personal or corporate information and finding ways to infiltrate our computers and other electronic devices. Before proceeding, I'm compelled to present the standard presentation disclaimer. I've highlighted the important information. I look forward to answering your questions after the presentation. There are three types of computer crimes. It is important to understand these differences and why someone would commit each type and why you or your organization might be targeted in order to determine how best to defend against each form of computer crime. Computer crime occurs when hardware, peripherals, and software are targeted for the purpose of destruction, disruption, theft, or to commit electronic crimes. It's worth noting, studies show over 80% of computer crimes are committed by insiders. Cybercrimes are computer crimes that incorporate the internet or other communications to target computers, networks, or other electronic devices. Cyberterrorism is a form of cybercrime, but with the added elements of fear and/or destruction, whether the threat is real or perceived. Cyberterrorism is typically executed on a large scale with the intent to cause as much disruption, destruction, or death as possible to their target or targets. Cyber terrorists typically attempt to even the playing field against more powerful foes, physically or economically, and are often motivated by ideological beliefs supported by those who feel oppressed or unfairly disadvantaged. I recently completed a research paper with Dr. Choi of Boston University, Dr. Claire Lee of Inha University in South Korea, on how terrorist organizations such as ISIS and Al-Qaeda are increasingly using cyberspace to research, design, and execute cyber terrorism attacks. Now that we've defined the three types of computer crimes, let's take a closer look at cybercrime. Excuse me. So what is contributing to increasing rates of cybercrime? The number of users of technology continues to increase as access to technology expands around the world. Social media usage increases the risks of being hacked or attacked. Risks of being caught for cybercrime remains low due to minimal legislation and increasing difficulties in identifying, apprehending, and successfully prosecuting cybercriminals. In the case of ransomware, demanding payment using cryptocurrencies provides a payment method that is untraceable. Most importantly, cybercriminals' social engineering skills increasingly fool the most savvy computer users into cooperating during a cyber attack. Sorry. Okay. Losses attributed to ransomware are in the billions of dollars, not including reputational damages or loss of productivity, and is becoming the greatest transfer of wealth as a result of criminal activity in history. Costs allocated to protecting against cyber attacks are being transferred from capital normally allocated to the operation and growth of businesses and will soon reach $1 trillion. It is estimated that by 2022, 6 billion users of technology will be potential targets of being victimized by a cybercrime. And crypto mining is becoming an extremely rewarding form of cybercrime that is difficult to detect, that involves stealing computing power to create cyber currencies. The Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, or OECD, estimates that 60 to 70% of employment comes from small and medium businesses in their 36 member countries. With the average recovery cost of a cyber attack estimated at $3.6 million, 60% of SMBs that incur a cyber attack will go out of business within 6 months. Over 50% of these attacks can be attributed to cyber criminals gaining access to SMB computers and networks through lax password usage. Let's take a look at some current cybercrime trends. Crime as a Service offers sophisticated cybercrime tools for purchase or rent. Ransomware has become the biggest threat facing internet users. Payment fraud involves ATMs, PayPal, false requests for payments, and tax fraud. The darknet facilitates purchases and sales of illegal items and services with little risk of detection. IoT, Internet of Things, is becoming a significant new threat. As more devices become capable of communicating over the internet, the more susceptible we are becoming to cyber attacks. This threat has already been witnessed in attacks against driverless cars. From June to July 2018, 87% of known cybercrime threats were malware, including ransomware and cryptojacking. Statistics show that the average time to detect a cyber intrusion is between 140 to 200 days after the attack is initiated, meaning that a cyber criminal can roam undetected throughout your networks during this period. This slide shows the more prepared your organization is to detect and respond to a cyber attack, the sooner you can commence a successful recovery effort. Even so, most companies remain ill-prepared against a cyber attack. In 2016, a PricewaterhouseCoopers survey of U.S. corporations revealed the following about their cyber readiness. 32% of organizations surveyed had suffered a cyber attack, and 34% anticipated they would experience one in the next 2 years. Only 37% had a cyber attack response plan in place. While 61% of CEOs expressed concern about the issue of cybersecurity, less than half of boards had ever asked about the state of their organization's cyber readiness. From a compliance standpoint, the option of having a board member responsible for cybersecurity policies and procedures is ceasing to be an option. Being proactive in this regard will prove to be both a legal and economically wise decision. It is imperative that management gives greater consideration to the many ways losses can be incurred as a result of a cyber attack. Access to technology is the lifeblood of every organization today. Losing access to your technology, even for a brief period of time, can prove extremely costly both in the short and long term. It may impact not only the operations of your organization, but also the ability to raise necessary funds to continue as a going concern. Let's take a quick look at one real-life example. This CryptoLocker cyber attack exemplifies what can happen when cyber criminals successfully bypass technological roadblocks. Even with so-called filtering, CryptoLocker bypassed security checks that resulted in a small number of employees being duped into opening an infected email and introducing malware onto their computers. Nearly 6,800 files had to be restored that required 265 man-hours to restore 9 people's computers to a state prior to the CryptoLocker attack. These costs do not include losses incurred related to lost productivity or reputational damages, depending on whether this cyber attack became public. Now let's look at some reasons why cyber attacks succeed. Cyber threats come from all directions and in many forms. Our mobile devices, laptops, Bluetooth communications, internet searches, emails, and shared documents are all potential sources that can be used to introduce malware. A significant amount of malware is delivered over the weekend. This is when people are most active on their personal computers and cell phones, often accessing unsecured networks. For those organizations that adopt BYOD or bring your own device policies, when attached to corporate networks on Monday, viruses can be introduced very easily. Cyber criminals understand time constraints can cause us to make innocent mistakes that can result in facilitating a cyber attack. Rushing through our emails Monday morning is representative of human nature. Social engineers design malware attacks to capitalize on these issues. As mentioned earlier, technology plays a large role in detecting and preventing cyber attacks. However, even the most sophisticated technological solutions remain vulnerable to the expertise of cybercriminals. One cybersecurity firm, Siren, reported that during September and October 2017, they examined nearly 12 million emails that have been forwarded to various email security systems to user corporate mailboxes. 89.5% were legitimate emails. 10.5% or 1.2 million emails contained spam or malicious messages that were missed by the filtering technology. Of the 10.5% that were missed, 10.2% of the total email traffic was spam. 0.3 or 34,000 emails were phishing emails, comprised of 18,000 financial phishing emails, almost 5,500 password phishing emails, and 10,600 were general phishing emails. These results provide strong evidence that cyber criminals continue to stay one step ahead of advances in technology designed to protect us against cyber attacks. Some cyber attacks are designed to seek out technical vulnerabilities. Backdoors are designed to provide access to computers, computer networks, or encrypted data by bypassing a system's security measures. They're often included by vendors to provide access to computer systems, but they can also be introduced accidentally by programmers and developers. Meltdown and Spectre, two of the most potentially impactful flaws in how modern-day computer processing units, or CPUs, isolate private data such as login credentials, were examples of zero-day issues that actually lasted for over 20 years, proof that cyber criminals never stop searching for new ways to infiltrate a computer. Zombies are computers infected with malicious software known as malware. Bots are specific applications or scripts cyber criminals use to perform specific tasks on command. And botnets are a series of connected zombies across a network that can be controlled all at once, so large-scale malware attacks can be executed. Keystroke loggers can record every keystroke you make, providing criminals with usernames and passwords, as well as your favorite websites and information about organizations and their networks. Gaining access to rootkits gives cybercriminals a clandestine method of accessing your computer's internals that provides means to alter the functionality of computers and networks. Web browser plugins are frequently used by social engineers to display content that is not associated with a website you intended to visit. Email generators can send millions of emails repeatedly with no human intervention required. And tools such as password crackers make the job of infiltrating computers and networks much easier for cyber criminals. But an increasing number of cyber attacks are not designed based on technological flaws. They're based on social engineering. Social engineering has been defined as the act of manipulating a person to take an action that may or may not be in the target's best interest. Social engineering has become a key element of designing cyber attacks. In fact, studies show that 90% of all phishing and spear phishing attacks incorporate some form of social engineering. Social engineers use carefully crafted methods that are designed to dupe us into providing information or access that will result in malware being introduced onto our computers, networks, or other electronic devices. We are all social engineers. It begins in our formative years. Demanding to be taken to McDonald's, wanting a bicycle, borrowing the car, or asking our parents to fund our education are all forms of social engineering. Cyber criminals have taken this inherent form of human nature and through continuous refinement, use it against us to pique our curiosity to cause us to react in predictable ways. From a cybercrime standpoint, there are two primary factors social engineers rely upon: human nature and human curiosity. They know how easy it is to fool someone into providing information that can be used to structure a cyber attack, and that many people can be easily encouraged to cooperate once a cyber attack is launched. The process of social engineering involves 5 steps. The first step is to gather as much information as possible about the intended target. Next, using elicitation, information is extracted from people without making them feel they are being interrogated or duped into providing information that can be used against them for some illicit purpose. Social engineers often use pretexting, pretending to be someone else as an attempt to obtain trust. They then take the acquired information to formulate the appropriate malware to exploit their target, execute the attack, and once completed, exit the environment to avoid detection. I recently worked with Dr. Mary Ellen Mastroielli of Boston University to develop a new theory addressing the elements of a socially engineered cyber attack called ResCap, required elements for a social engineered cyber attack theory. Dr. Robert Cadigan, also of Boston University, recently agreed to join Dr. Mastroielli and I to refine and conduct further research related to the ResCap model. ResCap posits that many cyber criminals have become proficient at understanding how individuals react to cyber attacks from a human nature and human curiosity perspective, collectively, collectively referred to as the human dimension, in order to find a way to convince their target to respond in a specific way in order for a cyber attack to succeed. By understanding the intricacies of ResCap, we can more effectively recognize how we can be manipulated during a cyber attack and reduce the probability of becoming a cyber victim. Let's take a closer look at some of the most common social engineering techniques used by cyber criminals when designing a cyber attack. Phishing is an attempt to obtain information such as usernames, passwords, and other secure information to be used for illicit activities. It's the #1 method used by cybercriminals to deliver ransomware and other forms of malware. Only 15% of organizations globally have reported they have not been targeted by a phishing attack, and for those who do get targeted, 30% of these types of emails will get opened. Spear phishing is a more targeted phishing attack encouraging recipients to open a link that redirects the victim to a different website where this information becomes available to cybercriminals. Even though spear phishing attacks are more targeted than phishing attacks, they can be delivered en masse and in seconds. Given the average costs attributed to a spear phishing attack are estimated at $1.6 million, it's clear why spear phishing rates continue to escalate. This slide presents timelines of a typical phishing attack. When an email phishing attack is delivered, within the first 2 minutes, someone will open the email, and within 4 minutes, someone will click on the website URL that is included in the email body. Within the first hour, 80% of those that receive such an attack will have opened the email and clicked on the URL. And within 24 hours, nearly 100% of all recipients of the email will have been victimized by the attack. Within the first 24 hours, the attacker will have removed access to the URL link in order to avoid being identified as the sender of the phishing attack. You can imagine how many people would be curious enough to open this email. Anyone who clicked on this image was immediately infected by any number of malicious forms of malware: viruses, trojans, ransomware, worms, denial of service, or other dangerous malware. This particular website hosted over 5,000 phishing pages. According to Symantec's 2017 Internet Security Threat Report, disguising malicious attachments as fake invoices remains the most popular tactic for tricking users into opening phishing emails and taking the bait. Let's look at a socially engineered attack related to financial fraud that represents over 1/4 of all such attacks: the CEO scam, also known as Business Email Compromise, or BEC, or whaling. This scam is a form of spear phishing. It is directed at a specific organization and specific individuals within an organization for the purpose of having funds forwarded to a different bank account than the person believes it's going to. A hacker sends a spoof email, allegedly from the CEO, to someone in an organization requesting an immediate wire transfer of funds or proprietary information to a specific customer or vendor or external account. Appearing to be a legitimate email, the funds are transferred. By the time the scam is discovered, the request has been completed. The FBI estimates that in 2016, $2.3 billion in losses were incurred in the US alone from the CEO scam in just over 3 years, and there was a 1,300% increase in BEC attacks from 2015 to 2017. Only about 4% of funds are ever recovered from the CEO scam. More importantly, banks have no legal obligation whatsoever to recover or return your funds. IDN stands for Internationalized Domain Name. Cybercriminals add, delete, or alter a single letter, character, or a number of a legitimate domain name and then register the modified domain name. One very effective way is to replace the letter capital I with a lowercase l, because they look exactly the same in certain sans serif fonts, such as Arial. They then register names of people from the original company website as legitimate email names along with their titles. Now, when they send the illegitimate email from the phony domain, the recipient assumes everything is legitimate and accepts the email as being valid. Clone phishing uses previously delivered legitimate emails that are then cloned and used to attach a fraudulent link that the recipient will be connected to. They're typically delivered under the guise of correcting a previously sent email and used to develop trust by the recipient that these too are legitimate emails. Phishing is conducted over the phone to request personal information, access to your computer, or attempting to invoke responses based on fear of immediate repercussions, often disguised as tax violations, critical technical support issues, or credit card issues. Smishing is a social engineered technique focused on cell phones and texting that baits users to divulge personal information to the sender that can be used against them to formulate a cyber attack. Snowshoeing involves pushing out messages through multiple domains or IP addresses in low volumes so filters cannot recognize them. And hailstorms are similar to snowshoeing, but end very quickly to avoid spam filters. Social media sites are a prime target because people share so much personal information that it's easily accessible by cybercriminals. Banner ads appear completely legitimate, and users of technology frequently click on them to investigate further. Text messaging has become another means for cybercriminals to distribute malware and launch phishing attacks. The greatest risk regarding text messaging is that those providing these services provide little in the way of protective measures from SMS-based cyber attacks. Now let's look more closely at ransomware. Ransomware continues to cause some of the greatest concerns for individuals and organizations. Typically delivered via email, over $5 billion in losses were attributed to ransomware attacks in 2017. Ransomware attacks are estimated to be growing at 350% per year, representing an 11-fold increase from 2016 to 2017 alone. Ransomware is created using JavaScript, a computer language used for a significant portion of legitimate websites and electronic messaging, making it very difficult to differentiate between valid and malicious emails or websites. Anyone can acquire ransomware software for a small fee or even for free, and get complete customer support to help launch an attack or assist victims who struggle when trying to pay a ransom fee. Interestingly, it's been noted in the past that computers that have Russian, Ukrainian, or Chinese as a primary language are less likely to be affected by a ransomware attack, leading one to surmise where the majority of ransomware attacks have been originating. Now let's take a quick look at how a ransomware attack is executed. Ransomware attacks involve 4 steps. The targeted victim receives an email that contains a click here or login instruction, or it may have an executable attachment, such as a Word document, Excel file, PDF, or a photo. The ransomware then seeks vulnerabilities that exit on the targeted system, searching for specific weaknesses in the operating system or software environment, depending on the type of ransomware. Once it locates a vulnerability allowing access, it begins to encrypt or delete files depending on the type of ransomware. Flashes a message on the screen saying your system has been locked, and instructions as to how to eliminate the ransomware, usually by paying a Bitcoin fee. Once the fee is paid, your data may or may not be unencrypted. These next slides address some examples of ransomware. Excuse me. Drydex is a Trojan that rapidly evolved into one of the top malware threats in the financial sector that targeted banks in over 30 countries around the globe and robbed victims of millions of dollars in each attack. Locky is an email virus released in 2016 that was attached to a Word document. It cost 1/2 to 1 Bitcoin to remove the ransomware, and if there was a Bitcoin wallet on your computer, Locky stole that as well. Jigsaw is a time bomb virus. Time bombs are particularly concerning because it can be some time until the ransomware launches and can remain in your backups for extended periods of time. Up to 5 million emails per hour can be delivered containing JAF ransomware. It is a very deceptive form of ransomware that plays heavily on social engineering and human curiosity by luring people to investigate an email that only contains an attachment. Depending on which version of Adobe you're running, the email prompts users to open the embedded document, or it may launch Microsoft Word when the user clicks on the link. The user is prompted to enable editing and content, which launches the ransomware to encrypt your files and take over your computer. These types of emails are becoming more and more commonplace. 3 theories are often referenced to explain what would cause someone to launch a cyber attack. Routine activity theory states that for any criminal act to succeed, there must be 3 inputs: a motivated offender, the cyber criminal, a target, yours or your organization's computers, and a lack of suitable guardianship, a means to gain access. Control theory addresses those who feel economically subordinate to others and believe they deserve equality. Social bonding theory addresses our value system in comparison to societies and the disconnect that results in people determining that crime can be an effective way to deal with our issues. One of the more common reasons of being selected as a target of a cyber attack is revenge. Jester committed cybercrimes as a form of seeking revenge against websites that leaked important information about U.S. national security. Recalling that over 80% of computer crimes are committed by insiders, disgruntled employees or those consumed by ideological beliefs remain two of the greatest threats an individual organization can face as potential targets. Let's take a quick look at various types of hackers and why they might be motivated to attack your organization. Script kiddies are nuisance hackers, focus more on quantity than quality of attacks. Hacktivists try to affect social changes by hacking organizations or governments to publicize personal concerns about specific issues. Spy hackers spy on corporations or governments to obtain competitive or classified information. State-sponsored or government-hired hackers to gain access to other governments' intelligence documents, national infrastructure, the political system, and security information. Suicide hackers are extreme hackers who are aware of the consequences of their actions, but have no concern about getting caught as long as their attacks succeed. Now that we've reviewed theories to explain why someone might elect to attack your organization and the different type of hackers who could conduct an attack, let's move on to the process of preparing against a cyber attack. These are three critical phases to commencing a cyber strategy. First, determine what assets need protecting, such as data, access to your systems, and proprietary information. This requires analyzing not only your infrastructure, but those who have access to it, and most importantly, what assets require the greatest protection. Next, perform a penetration test, or pen test as it's known, to see if your IT infrastructure can be compromised. Lastly, conduct a risk analysis based on the results of the pen test to identify what areas of your data or infrastructure are at risk, and what can be done to mitigate those vulnerabilities to prevent a cyber attack from occurring. And remember, educating your employees about the risks of a socially engineered cyber attack can become one of your most valuable assets in reducing the risk of you being victimized. What is it then that prevents companies from being better prepared against a cyber attack? Firstly, risks of being targeted by a cyber attack are regularly underestimated. Second, companies continue to be reluctant to assign sufficient funding to accommodate adequate measures to implement effective cybersecurity. Third, organizations do not properly analyze the consequences of a cyber attack. It's clear that management must incorporate measures that provide increased protection for their IT environment and organization overall. From a technical standpoint, they can include improving backup procedures and ensuring that backup devices are disconnected from the network or computer to avoid contamination, updating hardware and software more regularly, scanning more effectively for viruses and other intrusions, and maintaining strict controls over permission of who has access to networks and applications. From an administrative standpoint, provide cybersecurity training to all appropriate staff members, educate employees at all levels about social engineering. Understand that every employee and every computer from the top down are potential targets. And consider engaging a professional third-party cybersecurity firm to monitor and analyze emails, web traffic, and endpoint security monitoring. When engaging with a third-party service provider, walk before you run. Consider contracting for only those services you feel are immediately necessary to complement your cyber readiness strategy, and only add more if and when required. Otherwise, you risk introducing unknown conflicts into your existing cybersecurity structure. Maintain ongoing communication with all third-party service providers about known and anticipated changes to your environment, and regularly monitor the third-party vendors are adhering to the terms and conditions of your service level agreement. As this slide shows, 76% of IT professionals say a lack of visibility is their biggest challenge in addressing network threats. Forfeiting control of your data introduces the risk of reducing the ability to control your environment, especially as it pertains to access privileges. One major corporation stated that, quote, moving to the cloud and software as a service put their systems at risk in new ways. Attackers across the world can potentially break into some of our systems, which were well protected behind our perimeter before. Potential cyber attack risks associated with cloud service provider relationships include unauthorized access to your data or cloud account. CSPs are attractive targets for cyber criminals because There is a greater target pool of data as more businesses subscribe to CSP services, offering a one-stop resource for potential targets of cyber attacks. Cloud accounts can also be hacked for their processing power, such as what happened to Tesla with their Amazon Web Service Cloud account in 2018, when it was discovered a cryptojacker was running Kubernetes application to mine cryptocurrencies by accessing Tesla's AWS account and stealing their processing power. Your CSP may not adhere to legal and compliance requirements that your organization is bound by. And if your CSP's environment is compromised, how will you be able to access your data or services, and what measures are in place to determine if your data has been hacked? One additional consideration should be that if your data is with a US-based CSP, under the Patriot Act, the US government has complete legal access to all of your data globally. Due to the growing number of cyber attacks in recent years, cybercrime insurance has become increasingly important. Alliance Global and Specialty Insurance predicted the cyber insurance market would grow from $2 billion in 2015 to $20 billion by 2025. Due to the transferability of many types of malware, responsibility is becoming much more important consideration when determining where a cyber attack originated. In the event that you are attacked, do you become responsible for any tertiary damages to others who are integrated into your network, and vice versa? It is worth investigating the pros and cons of acquiring cybercrime insurance for your organization. Let's address passwords. Clearly, not having effective policies and procedures regarding password controls or leaving the responsibility of password maintenance to individuals is not an effective strategy. For example, updating one's password from 12345 to 123456, or as recommended by Dilbert's boss, adding sign language and squirrel noises as added protection are not effective solutions. Ineffective password policies and procedures related to current employees, as well as continued access rights by ex-employees, can prove very costly, particularly if a disgruntled employee or ex-employee decides to seek revenge by infiltrating your systems or selling their access information to others. Recall I said earlier that up to 80% of computer breaches within an organization can be attributed to insiders. These statistics from a 2016 survey conducted by SailPoint Technologies reveal an even greater potential threat related to password controls. In a survey of 1,000 employees in 6 countries, 1 in 5 respondents said they would sell their password to a third-party organization. Nearly 45% of them would do it for less than $1,000. The question that is not addressed in this slide is how many times would they sell their password? Consider these statistics from a 2017 survey of 500 IT decision makers. Only half of respondents could state with certainty that ex-employees couldn't still gain access to their networks using their passwords. 20% reported that ex-employees had infiltrated their networks after leaving the company. 48% of the respondents could not explain why access by ex-employees had not been canceled. And half admitted ex-employees still had access to the organization's networks after 1 day, 32% access remained available after a week, and 25% said they had no idea how long ex-employees continued to have access to their networks after leaving or being let go. Effective password policies and procedures will mitigate these risks. Statistics vary greatly on how long it takes to crack a password, but the more complex and longer you make it, the longer it will take to crack. Implementing a 2-factor authentication will significantly reduce password risks. As challenging as it is, change your passwords regularly. Do not use the same password for all accesses. Once a hacker has your password, they'll try to use it to access everything you access. Password management service providers can be effective, but these service providers can be hacked as well. And ensure your password controls have specific steps to cancel passwords for ex-employees. Here are some indications that you may have been hacked. Security software is disabled, such as antivirus or Windows Task Manager or Registry Editor. New software appears that you didn't install. After you end a web session, a new web session starts without your intervention. Odd messages start appearing, such as, "Your disk is full," when you know it isn't. An internet search you start suddenly gets redirected to another site you were not searching for. Passwords that have worked in the past suddenly stop working, and in some cases, you get prompted to enter your old password so you can update it to a new one. You start receiving odd emails from people you know, often with subject lines like, "Hey, just thought you'd be interested in this," with an associated link to click on. Or you lose control of your mouse and it starts moving on its own. So what steps should you take if you become a cyber victim? You can address a specific attack, identify how your systems were infiltrated, and patch any found vulnerabilities. However, this is a short-term approach that will not necessarily protect you against further attacks. Instead, consider implementing a formalized 5-step process to address the effects of a cyber attack. Confirm when the attack occurred, what type of attack occurred, and what data was affected, and determine who and what was affected, your organization only, or is it possible the attack infected customers or clients you do business with? Next, restrict all data from your network. Encrypt any isolated data, reset all passwords in your organization, and consider implementing a 2-factor authentication if you haven't already got one. Disconnect all host systems that were affected and remove all files that were hacked. Next, restore all files that were infected, deleted, or damaged, and verify that all security patches for hosted software and operating systems are up to date. Review the consequences of the attack. If you determine that a contractor or outside service provider, including major software companies, may have been the source of the cyber attack, consider your legal options and inform your insurance company. Formulate a plan to notify everyone who may have been affected by your cyber attack as soon as possible. This allows others whose systems may have been jeopardized to commence their own analysis and recovery procedures. Final step is perform a formal review of emergency response procedures related to possible future attacks, determine if the attack could have been prevented, implement changes in any new security policies and procedures as required, and review staffing of your IT department. Should third-party support be considered to complement or train your current IT personnel? Let's move on to laws and regulations. Ultimately, it's best for all users of technology to take responsibility to be as cyber responsible as possible. However, if you do get hacked, who should you call? Many agencies are strictly reporting agencies that create databases related to cybercrimes. Depending on the magnitude of a cyber attack and who is affected, some agencies will open an investigation or possibly include your complaint into an existing investigation. However, in the majority of cases, your case will simply be registered with millions of others on file. This is not a criticism of law enforcement agencies' desire to assist, but indicative of having limited resources, facing restrictive legislation, and the global characteristics of cyber attacks, making cybercrime investigations complex, time-consuming, and difficult to solve. However, progress is being made to assist law enforcement agencies to be more effective with regard to cybercrime investigations. In cooperation with the Canadian Association of Chiefs of Police, CATA Alliance has created the E-Crime Cyber Council to advise on technology and government policies to fight cybercrime. The Budapest Convention is the only binding international instrument on the issue of cybercrime. It serves as a guideline for any country developing comprehensive national legislation against cybercrime and as a framework for international cooperation between state parties to this treaty. U.S. CERT responds to major incidents, analyzes threats, and exchanges critical cybersecurity information with trusted partners around the world. NCCCIC is US-based and leads national efforts to analyze threats to critical cyber and communications infrastructure, develops shared situational awareness across a broad set of partners and constituents, and leads the national response to cybersecurity and communications incidents while protecting Americans' constitutional and privacy rights. On an international scale, legislators and private organizations are working together to develop standards and regulations to hold organizations accountable for protecting customer data, as well as the risks of spreading malware via business relationships to third and fourth parties. These include International Standards Organization, NIST, Federal Financial Institutions Examination Council, and others. In Europe, GDPR, or General Data Protection Regulation, came into effect as of May 2018 and affects companies not only in the EU, but all companies globally who store data on EU citizens. Its legislation addresses privacy and data breaches and carries very stiff penalties for non-conformance. Regulators are stepping up efforts to enact legislation that dictates how third and fourth parties must operate with regard to personal data. While industry regulations may be cumbersome and restrictive at times, these regulations represent a starting point to make organizations more aware, responsible, and accountable for protecting customers' data and in meeting standards to reduce the risk of a cyber attack. Over time, such cooperative processes will result in effective policies that are reasonable to implement and adhere to in a timely manner. In order to ensure that all employees are familiar with the risks of cyber attacks and how they can impact both individuals and organizations, it is imperative everyone adheres to an easy-to-understand set of policies and procedures and standards so employees understand how to conduct themselves when accessing corporate systems. Policies and procedures must be endorsed by senior management, and all employees must understand it is mandatory for all employees to review and sign off they have read and understand them. It is imperative that employees understand failure to adhere to these policies and procedures could result in serious consequences, not only for the organization, but to them personally, and that failure to abide by these policies and procedures could result in corrective measures for those who violate or ignore them. An organization that understands its assets and methods of control can reduce the risk of a cyber attack. When creating or updating your policies and procedures, the following steps must be considered. A need to commit to the planning and preparation phases with realistic commitments to the resources necessary to complete these tasks. Recognizing there are 3 tiers of policies that exist in every organization. Policies and procedures that apply to the overall operations of the organization, those that apply to specific departments of the company, and those that apply to applications such as accounting, manufacturing, inventory, and others. Correctly identifying what your assets are, how to protect them is paramount. Next, formulate or update existing policies and procedures and develop an effective rollout to employees, emphasizing the importance of understanding and adhering to these policies and procedures by highlighting their advantages in protecting them from cyber attacks. Lastly, new employee training must include policies and procedures related to cybersecurity. In summary, here are some best practices to reduce your risks of becoming a cyber victim. Understand that every user of technology is a potential target. After appropriate reviews of any software or hardware updates, ensure they are implemented as soon as possible. Limit the use of corporate systems for personal use. Review and/or modify existing bring your own device policies and procedures. Never grant access to personal or corporate systems to unverified or unknown sources. Other consideration and best practices include always take time to review all electronic communications. Question your own responses if you're not familiar with the person communicating with you. You might well be getting socially engineered. Do not hesitate to report any abnormalities to your IT department or ISP. Common sense should always be your guide when accessing technology as to how you communicate and conduct web searches. Watch for obvious errors in communications or activities on your devices and computers, such as spelling errors, odd-looking logos, and poor grammar. And finally, ensure your policies and procedures addressing your cyber readiness needs are effective, reviewed, and updated regularly, enacted, and enforced. This concludes my presentation. Thank you for your attention, and I'd be pleased to answer any questions you might have. Thank you.
Chris, thank you so much. There was a lot of information there that was quite shocking to me. Perhaps the alums who are on the call here, who are experts, were less surprised than I was. Those of you who are participating, if you would like to ask Chris a question, just click on the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen and submit your question. I'll read it out loud so everyone can hear it, and I'll turn it over to Chris to answer it. And while we're waiting for questions to come in, Chris, I have to say, the thing that maybe surprised me the most was that 30% of phishing emails get opened. That's so surprising to me, given the number of emails that people never open at all. It seems really high to me.
It's a big number. The social engineers are so good at what they do. As I said at the beginning, we like to think we're smarter than the cyber criminals using social engineering, for example. but we're not. And in the same way that you do what you do all day and all the people on this webinar do what they do all day to become experts, cyber criminals get up in the morning to figure out ways to get us. That's what they do. And it's very rewarding, and there's more and more people doing it, and it will continue.
Well, and I think that's probably the big takeaway for me is that I don't own a business and I'm not in IT, but now I see definitely what my part is in all of this, because you mentioned the social engineering, the fact that I got a lot of email. So there were a lot of good tips in here that I'll definitely take away from this. So I appreciate that. We have a question from Catherine. She says, great presentation. And she said, I work with a nonprofit. Curious if you have any suggestions on how to identify a good and cost-effective partner to help us walk through the cyber world to protect our clients, volunteers, and donors.
Okay, so I had a little bit of trouble hearing because of the echo there. Can you try that again? Sorry.
Catherine works at a nonprofit, and she's looking for suggestions on how to identify a good, cost-effective partner to help walk through the cyber world to protect clients, volunteers, and donors.
Wow, that's a complicated question. It would depend, of course, what the current status is of her organization, who they have on staff. If she wanted to contact me by email directly, I could probably give her a more effective answer after I can ask her a few questions. It all depends, again, on the cyber readiness that they're currently at and what they're looking for. So they probably would be looking at getting some sort of a third-party organization in to help them, perhaps with endpoint monitoring as an example, to monitor what's coming in through their emails and their environment to make sure that it's as secure as possible, and also ensuring that the individuals in the company are educated to the point in areas like social engineering and reviewing, as I said in the presentation, things such as bring your own device and other possible issues that could introduce cybercrime into their environment. But I encourage her to contact me if she wishes to do that.
Great. She said thank you. Linda is interested in the vulnerability from the Internet of Things. Are there ways to protect yourself when driving a newer, smarter car? Should some things be disabled?
The problem with the Internet of Things is that the cyber criminals are becoming so good at this that they can now access your refrigerator, your thermostats, your lights. I saw an example just recently where people were standing in their house and their electronic front door lock was being opened and closed repeatedly, and they weren't even touching it. As far as driverless cars, there's an interesting webinar, a video people can look up, and it involves 3 individuals with a Jeep, and they did this on purpose. Two of the gentlemen were sitting in their home, and the other gentleman was in his Jeep, and he was driving down the road, and they went in first with a device they bought at Radio Shack or somewhere that was $40 they stuck onto the bottom of it, and it completely took over control of the vehicle while it was driving down the road. And then when they got rid of that, they actually went in through Bluetooth through the radio, and they were turning the wipers on and off, they were affecting the brakes, they were steering the vehicle. So the Internet of Things is a whole new threat that cyber criminals are using now to go in where you're not even aware things are happening and there's no human intervention. So how to protect yourself against it is a difficult question because they're using things like Bluetooth, wireless, whatever, and there's not a lot you can do about it at this point.
Jennifer asks, what is your favorite program to scan for malware?
Well, I use Norton on my laptop just from a general standpoint. They have some very powerful things as well. But there's a company called Cyberreason that if you go to the Cyberreason website, they actually have a free ransomware scanning software. I attend many of their webinars, and they put this out there because they're a very large organization that does a lot of work with international organizations. But they got so tired of people getting hit with ransomware attacks that if you go to their website, you can actually download a ransomware scanner, and it's worked for me already. I'll be sitting here working, and numbers of weeks ago, I got hit with 2 ransomware attacks within about 10 minutes, and Cyberreason blocked them. what they do is they update the ransomware awareness to the current status of what their company is aware of. So you're getting the most up-to-date ransomware protection, and it's free. So I would encourage people to investigate that.
Great, thank you. Karen says she backs up her home computer. How does she make sure this backup isn't infected?
Well, you can't be sure if it's a time bomb, but one smart thing is, given the price of thumb drives these days, go out and purchase at least 4 of them, for example. And then once a week, you can back up to a thumb drive, and then the next week back up to another thumb drive, and just keep circulating those thumb drives. Make sure you're backing up your data. It's not as important to be backing up your applications, because assuming that people actually pay for their applications, in the event that something happened, you could get it reloaded. But you want to have your most critical data circulating on some thumb drives or whatever. The most important thing, as I mentioned in the presentation, is do not leave your backup devices connected. Because if you put a thumb drive in and say, oh, that'll remind me to do it, or you have a cable of some sort connected, and you leave it connected and your computer gets infected, well, your backup is now infected as well. So always make sure that your backups are disconnected as soon as you do them.
Great, thank you. Thomas asks, do you have any recommendations for pen test companies?
Actually, I don't. I don't have any relationships with any companies specifically, but it's quite simple, actually, to go online, do an investigation in pen testing. And again, it also comes back to how advanced is the knowledge within your organization for pen testing? How many people there have been trained to do it? There's pros and cons to getting internal and external pen tests. I think that the better way to go is to go with an external pen test, because 1, they're certified, 2, they'll have the latest technology, and 3, they have no personal issue. All they're trying to do is come in and show you that we can get into your system and this is how we can do it. It's less effective, in my opinion, if you do your own internal pen test, because you may not be up to date on the latest pen testing tools. So you might actually do a pen test thinking you're safe, but in fact you're not. And you could miss a lot of things. Also, if you're buying off the shelf pen testing software, how do you know how current it is? So I always recommend look at a third party. Certainly you can check them out, check their reputations, do some interviewing, but it's a very worthwhile process.
Chris asks, antivirus and anti-malware software should block any script download from phishing emails, etc. Isn't that so? How far are we protected by software like McAfee, Avast, Norton, etc.?
Well, as I said, I do use Norton on mine, and I'm not saying the others aren't good, but I use it as something that runs in background that really goes after many of the more common attacks. They do have a guarantee that if you get hit with a malware attack, they'll cover the cost of their software, but there are certain conditions attached to that as well. It does have a powerful tool that can go in and do some pretty aggressive checking, and I use that quite frequently just to make sure that things aren't getting into my registry editor, if you will, registries I should say. But it all comes back at the end of the day to being careful to clear the cookies, clear your histories, be careful where you're going, make sure when you're accessing websites, take your time and always try to go to the source. One example is Java is one of the worst issues as far as malware. And of course, we always get in the bottom right-hand corner, your Java needs to be updated. I never update that way. I go directly to the manufacturer's website and I check my Java through them. So if I go to Oracle and I click on it, it'll say check for Java updates. And guess what? Most times I'm already up to date. So the Java notification I'm getting in the bottom right corner is a malware attack. But because things are written in JavaScript, ransomware attacks, and the majority of applications out there are written, it's very difficult for some of these organizations to detect which ones are valid and which ones aren't.
So we're running out of time here. We have a couple of longer questions, Chris, that I will send to you afterwards to make sure that you have a chance to look at them. But let's do one more. We have a comment here. This is a very informative webinar. I now see why my company has been making so many strict changes. What would be the best way to get started in this field, or just learn more about it?
Sorry, to get started in the field of cybercriminology?
I believe so, yes.
Well, you could do what I did. You go to Boston University and take the Cybercrime Investigation Cybersecurity course, which was amazing. But there's so many courses out there. And also, I attend probably anywhere from 5 to 10 webinars a week from companies that are in that business. And that really gives you an interesting perspective of the areas that you may have an interest in expanding. But clearly, more and more universities and community colleges are coming out with courses. You can also go through for certifications as well. There's a number of types of certifications you can get as a cybercriminologist. They're very complicated, difficult courses, but they teach you a lot of things. And so I would just suggest either look online for cybercrime certification type courses, and or look to your universities or community colleges for courses and start taking some and see how you feel about it.
Chris, thank you so much. And thank you to everyone who participated today. We will send out the recording. It takes about a week for us to get that recording and do the closed captioning, but I will send it out. And we had a couple of requests for information about certain websites, so I will make sure to send that out as well. But I want to thank you, Chris, for your expertise and for your time. And I hope you all will join us for other webinars. We have career webinars every month, and we have educational webinars pretty frequently now too. We have our next one on November 30th with an alumna named Kristen Lee, who will talk about mindfulness in today's changing world. So I hope to see you all again, and thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks very much for having me and letting me present. I appreciate it.